The Edmonton Oilers have advanced to the second round of the playoffs, and they did it with defense. Brett Holdon is here to talk about the Oilers, their success, and what lies ahead for Edmonton's hockey team.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to the Locked On NHL Podcast. Gil Martin, glad to be with you as I am every Monday. And thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. It's my pleasure to welcome to the show Brett Holdon, the host of Locked On Edmonton Oilers. And Brett, your team getting the job done in a big spot in Game 7. All right, let's start with the obvious. Connor McDavid, it almost looked like he willed his team to victory on Saturday. Talk about that performance and what it means for the Oilers and for his stature as one of the best players in hockey.
Well, I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about it, because back in 2015, when the Edmonton Oilers drafted this guy, all of the Edmonton Oilers fans sat there waiting for this exact moment, for the Game 7, and Connor McDavid delivered. He played 27 minutes and 23 seconds, the most he's played all series. I almost said all season. The entire series, he played 27 minutes, and it showed. The guy was fantastic. The Kings tried to put Philip Deneau on him throughout the entire game, but the guy's not going to play 27 minutes. Philip Deneau is as good as a defensive forward can get, but he's just not going to cover Connor McDavid for 27 minutes. And Connor McDavid showed why he is the best player in the world in Game 7.
Talk about that goal, because it was just spectacular.
It's like watching the beer league ringer come out and play in the third period. The guy came from the blue line, had the puck the entire way, got hooked, lost it, brought it back, got stopped, and then roofed it still with two men on him. Like the guy, like I said, it's like a professional in beer league hockey. That Sean Durzi was just sitting there waiting until somebody told him to do something. It was phenomenal. The work ethic on him is exactly what you expect, and that's what you get from him.
Would be remiss if we overlook the contributions of Mike Smith, a shutout in Game 7, his second shutout of the series. Talk to me about his performance in this series and what it means for the Oilers going forward.
Well, a lot of people really got on Mike Smith after Game 1, and obviously he even admitted to the fact that he made a mistake in Game 1, potentially probably lost them the game in Game 1, had all the fans there and just really got the jitters to him. And a lot of Oilers fans were sitting there throughout the whole series, clenched fists, wondering when the next mistake was going to happen. That never came for Mike Smith. Mike Smith locked in from Game 1 after that mistake. And even the games that the Oilers did lose, even that 4-0 game, a lot of people can't just sit there and blame Mike Smith. There were tips. There were a lot of other factors into it. But Mike Smith stayed constant, and that is massive for the Oilers' success in the playoffs. Massive, massive.
The Oilers do not usually get a lot of attention for their defense, but talk to me about some of the defensemen and who quietly stood out in this series.
Excuse me. I'll take Cody Ceci for 200, please.
Go.
My goodness. What is that? Darnell Nurse, you can talk about Darnell Nurse as much as anybody can, but Cody Ceci and Brett Kulak, the way they have stepped up in this series and hopefully in the next series for the Oilers, has done wonders for them. I remember when the Oilers first signed Cody Ceci in the offseason. Oh, and everyone's like, oh, you mean the guy from Toronto? Oh, you mean the guy the Senators had? And then on the other side, the Penguins fans were going, please take care of him. Please take care of him. And you see why, because in Game 7, he has a goal and 5 assists in this series. He's the most productive defenseman in that entire series. That included Darnell Nurse and Evan Bouchard and Sean Durzi.
Yeah, he certainly looked outstanding. Wanted to ask you briefly about the LA Kings. I mean, most people didn't expect them to make the playoffs this year. They extend Edmonton to 7. Talk about what they were like as an opponent and what they accomplished in this series.
Well, as somebody who's gone down to I have family down in Los Angeles, so I've always been able to kind of consume Kings content and games. And for people who don't really follow the Kings, they are gritty, and they've always been gritty since they won the cup in 2012, I believe it was. So when they went out there, when the Oilers got this matchup, you knew you were playing Dustin Brown, Anze Kopitar, and Jonathan Quick. And as Oilers fans sat there and saw it, they were like, not again. You're playing an experienced team. I mean, it honestly could have been like a Dallas team, and I don't want to put Dallas under the bus here because they are a fantastic team. But when you take a look at how Dallas potentially could have been lined up against the Oilers as opposed to the LA Kings, you're sitting there and you got the experience, you got the young tenacity of the guys like the Sean Durzeys, like the Blake Lizottes, like the Mario, his brother Adrian Kempes. It was scary. Just honestly, I'm going into game 7 wondering, like, there's no way the Oilers can pull this off against this team, but they did.
Indeed, they did. What, obviously, we don't know as of this recording who the next round opponent is going to be, but what are the keys for Edmonton to have a good round 2 and to make a long playoff run at this point?
Well, they got to stay physical. I mean, you saw, especially at home for the Oilers, when they would go and bang bodies, it didn't even matter if you got an inch of the guy. The crowd is going crazy. You can just skate right into the boards and hit wall, and all the fans would go crazy. If you're going out there and banging bodies, Oilers fans are going to love it, and the energy is going to keep flowing through. And eventually, depending on where you do play, whether that's in Calgary or if that is in Dallas, if you're banging bodies and if you're banging bodies of the opposing team, the fans are going to be tired of it. They're just going to be like, stop, man, please. So the physicality will be massive for the Oilers, especially with Evander Kane, who can score goals on top of being physical. Plus, they got to start fast. That was big for the Oilers in any period, first, second, or third. They got to get a fast start early.
All right, Brett, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
Absolutely. Locked On Oilers is free and available wherever you find your podcast. That includes Spotify, iTunes, wherever you find them. Plus, we are up on YouTube as well. So make sure you do go and find us and subscribe to us there. I'm also on Twitter. All of my social medias are The Real Holdon 40 as well. Locked On Oilers on Twitter. So make sure you follow us there as well.
All right, Brett, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. Our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, the Stanley Cup playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts.